Yeah, hi friends. Today we are going to discuss about Spring Boot. So, what is Spring Boot and why we need to use Spring Boot? All those things we'll discuss. So, so let me maximize. Yes. So here I'm going to create um, all the videos step by step. So how you will work in a real-time scenario. So which will give us a basic idea about how to work when you are working with Spring Boot application in your project. So I'm going to create a couple of videos. So this is my first video on Spring Boot. So I'm going to create around 50 to 60 videos on the Spring Boot with explaining all the flow. So first, understand what is Spring Boot application is. So nowadays everything is Spring Boot and microservices. So why we need to go for Spring Boot application? So and for each theory, I will give one example with how to do the coding and all those things. So let's start now. So hi all, this is Ravi, having 10 plus years of IT experience. Currently, I'm working as architect in one of the Indian MNC. So yes, so Spring Boot is a completely new project provided a pivotal team. So pivotal team means the team which introduced the Spring framework. So it is a framework developed on top of existing Spring framework. So if you look into this diagram, so whatever we discussed in the previous slide, so the same thing is here represented as a diagrammatically. So now Spring Boot is built on top of Spring. So your Spring Boot will use all the components of your Spring. So to work with your Spring Boot, yes, you need to know about Spring, at least a little bit. So what are the different modules available on Spring? So what is Spring IOC? What is dependency injection? What is auto-wire? What is component? What is repository? And like that, what is controller? Like that, different annotations, a little bit knowledge of Spring is required. Anyway, I will cover about these things in my next videos. But first, let's go with Spring Boot. So now Spring Boot is a new framework built on top of Spring only. So if you think, so what is a Spring? Spring is an application layered framework. So which will provides different components, means different modules. So you can use IOC, Spring AOP, Spring JDBC, Spring securities, like different modules are there in the Spring. So you can use all the Spring modules in your Spring Boot. So now Spring Boot is built on top of Spring. So why they built, so Spring is there. So why they built Spring Boot? So see, here I give some simple architecture of your Spring. So Spring will contain the basic module. So if you are using Spring, means you are using Spring Core. So what is a Spring Core? Those things maximum people will know. So for those who don't know much about Spring, so I will create one more video on that. But yeah, on Spring IOC we are having different modules. So Spring DAO is there, Spring MVC is there, Spring Web is there, Spring ORM is there, Spring AOP is there, like different modules are there. So it's a loosely coupled. So whatever the module you want to use it. Whatever the module you don't like, means you don't want or you don't require in the project, you no need to use whatever the components you want to use. So use those things. That's why Spring is a layered architecture framework with loosely coupling. So, but if you want to use Spring, yes, you need some compulsory. You need to use your Spring core. So, which is a base. On top of that, your Spring framework will works. Spring Boot is used completely new development model to make Java development very easy by avoiding some traditional development steps and boilerplate code configurations. So if you look into Spring, so there you need to configure some configurations files like web data. Even though if you are creating, yes, there will be a web data XML, and there will be -servlet.xml and application.property file. So those things you need to configure, and you need to configure the POM file also. So in the POM file, you need to add n number of dependencies. While you are adding the dependencies, you need to make sure that there is no conflict between those dependencies. So the dependencies are compatible. If the dependencies are not compatible, then you will get a major minor version issues. So those problems also resolved in your Spring Boot. So there is less configurations in the Spring Boot and boilerplate coding is removed in the Spring Boot. So that is a basic advantage. Means, but that is one of the basic advantages. There are a lot of advantages are there, but we will discuss those things. But as of now, yes, if you are talking about Spring Boot, a Spring Boot, by using Spring Boot, you can fastly develop. Means you can develop application very fastly, and you can, and Spring Boot removes the boilerplate code and configurations. So you don't need to write application.property file and -servlet.xml file or web.xml file. Some in the POM you no need to manually add the dependencies. Yes, in the if you are using Spring Boot also, you need to use POM file, but you no need to create any project. Readily available project will be there. How we will create those things I will explain in next sessions. Now, so what is Spring Boot? Spring Boot is a framework from the Spring team to, and it provides a default code and annotations to configure to quick start a new Spring project application within no time. See, if you are using the Spring, so to start your application, it will take some lot of time. First, you need to add all the configurations, means -servlet.xml, application.property files, and in the POM, you need to add the required dependencies. There, you are going to add 10 to 15 dependencies, and those should be compatible. And then you need to add the server. So those are the minimum things you need to do. So it will take some time, but when it comes to Spring Boot, you can give some out, you can create a new project and you can give some output with no time. So how? So it will avoid the boilerplate coding and configurations. So it will avoid the boilerplate code and XML configurations. So the advantages of Spring Boot is it's very easy to develop Spring based applications with using Java or Groovy. So now we are talking with Java, we're not talking about Groovy. So by using Spring Boot, you can develop Java based applications with very easily. It reduces a lot of developer time and increases the productivity. So how it will reduces developer time? When you are creating the application, that time it is. It avoids writing a lot of boilerplate code. So boilerplate coding is removed and XML configurations are removed. It is very easy to integrate Spring Boot application with Spring ecosystems like Spring JDBC, Spring ORM, Spring Data, Spring Security, etc. Yeah, because Spring Boot is developed on top of Spring only. So your Spring Boot will use all the components, means all the ecosystems of your Spring. So it follows optimum default configurations approaches to reduce the developer time, developer efforts. And one more basic advantage of the Spring Boot is it provides embedded Tomcat servers. No, you no need to add the servers manually like Spring. So, and it provides a command line interface to run your Spring Boot applications quickly. So, and it comes with inbuilt memory. So inbuilt memory database. So when you are working with real-time applications, you won't use any inbuilt database in memory. Sorry, in memory database. So because Spring Boot provides H2O inbuilt database, but when you stop the server, so you will lose the data. So If you want to do some practice, yes, you can do it, but it's preferred to use either MySQL or Oracle or DB2 or Postgres is a preferable. So, so these are the things. So when it comes to Spring Boot, so what's the advantage? So it avoids boilerplate coding. So that is the one advantage, and it will reduce us the XML configurations. So that is the second advantage, and you can create a project very fastly, and you can show some output within no time. And it will comes with embedded Tomcat servers. So these are the main advantages. And your Spring Boot application is built on top of Spring only. So your Spring Boot will use all the ecosystems of your Spring. So now let's define in a, whatever we discussed till now. So let's define with a diagram. See, Spring Boot is nothing but it's a Spring framework plus embedded Tomcat servers minus XML configurations. So that is and Spring Boot. So let's discuss one more. So Spring Boot is a framework which defined on top of Spring, which will comes with embedded Tomcat server. Here you no need to add any servers. So and less XML configurations. So that is about your Spring Boot. So what are the prerequisites? So now, so your Spring Boot application will works with Java 8, and anyway you need to have it Maven and some IDE. So I'm using Spring Tool Suite. So how to download Java 8, how to download Maven, and how to download IDE 3. All those things we'll discuss in next session. Yes. So this is about my first session. So in next session, I will explain remaining things. Thank you.